The air in the room felt heavy, thick with cigar smoke and unspoken threats. It was late, the kind of late where shadows stretched long and played tricks on your eyes. A single, dim bulb hung overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the faces gathered around a polished, dark wood table. At the head of that table sat a man, older, with eyes that seemed to hold all the coldness of a winter night. He leaned forward, his voice a low rumble that cut through the silence like a knife. His gaze locked onto Muhammad Ali, who sat opposite him, seemingly unfazed. "You better lose tonight," the man said, each word landing with the weight of a lead pipe. His face was a mask, but the message was clear, chillingly so. This wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. This was the kind of man who didn't ask twice. He was a boss, the kind who pulled strings in places no one talked about, the kind who saw boxing as another chessboard for his power plays. Ali, however, just sat there. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. His eyes, usually so full of fire and quick wit, now held an almost unsettling calm. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on his lips, a secret he wasn't sharing. It was a look that said, "You think you know me, but you don't." It was defiance, quiet and powerful, a silent challenge that surprised anyone watching, even those used to Ali's boldness. Then, just as quickly, the scene shifted. The dim room vanished, replaced by a blinding flash of camera lights. The roar of a stadium crowd crashed in, a wave of sound that swallowed everything else. Thousands of faces, a sea of excitement and an anticipation, stretched out into the distance. The smell of sweat and liniment hung in the air. The ring, bathed in bright spotlights, looked almost sacred. A stage for heroes and villains. This was it. The main event. The fight everyone had been waiting for. The stakes were impossibly high. A blend of personal pride, public expectation, and the hidden, unseen pressures from men like the one in that smoky room. Some battles are fought before the first punch is thrown. The camera held on Ali's face as he made his way through the ropes. His expression was a mix of focus and something else. Something deeper. Determination, yes, but also a quiet understanding of the forces at play, forces that went far beyond the bell. His eyes scanned the crowd, then settled on something unseen, a point in the distance only he could perceive. What was he thinking? What would he do? The questions hung heavy in the air, a tension that promised an unforgettable night. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. To understand that moment, that quiet defiance in the face of raw power, you have to go back, way back, to a different time and place. Imagine Louisville, Kentucky, in the 1940s and 50s. This wasn't the Louisville of today. It was a city deeply divided, where lines were drawn not just on maps, but in people's minds. Cassius Martellus Clay Jr. grew up in the West End, a vibrant, tight-knit black community. His neighborhood was full of life, gospel music spilling from church doors on Sundays, the smell of home cooking wafting through open windows, kids playing stickball in the streets until dusk. His parents, Cassius Sr. and Odessa, instilled strong values in him: respect, hard work, and a belief in himself, even when the world outside told him he wasn't good enough. He saw firsthand the unfairness of segregation, the white-only signs that marked water fountains and restaurants, the casual disrespect that could turn ugly in an instant. This environment, while nurturing within its own boundaries, was also a constant reminder of a larger world that didn't always see him as equal. It forged a resilience, a fire in his belly that would later define him. Cassius was a natural showman, even as a boy. He loved to talk, to boast, to entertain. He was quick-witted, charming, and had a way with words that could make you laugh or make you think. When his bicycle was stolen at age 12, he went to a local police officer, Joe Martin, to report it. Martin, who also coached boxing at a local gym, told him if he wanted to get back at the thief, he should learn to fight. From that day, the path was set. He took to boxing like he was born for it. He loved the discipline, the strategy, and especially the spotlight. He wasn't just good, he was spectacular, floating like a butterfly and stinging like a bee long before those words became his legendary catchphrase. But even as a young amateur, as Cassius Clay started making a name for himself, the undercurrents of the boxing world were already present. Boxing, especially in that era, was a tough business. It attracted all sorts of characters, some honest, some less so. It was a sport where fortunes could be made and lost overnight, and where a young, talented fighter could easily be seen as an asset to be controlled, a commodity to be exploited. Organized crime, the kind of shadowy influence the man in the dim room represented, had its fingers in many pies across America during those decades. And boxing was a particularly tempting one. Big money changed hands, bets were placed, and the outcome of fights could mean millions. Promoters, managers, sometimes even trainers, had connections that went beyond the legal. They operated in a gray area where favors were exchanged and loyalty was often bought, not earned. Cassius, with his undeniable talent and growing charisma, quickly became a target for these influences. He heard the whispers, saw the deals being made in back rooms, felt the subtle pressures to align himself with certain people, to fight certain opponents, to follow certain scripts. These were the early seeds of tension, small instances of external control that hinted at a larger, more pervasive system. He was learning, slowly but surely, that the biggest fights weren't always in the ring, and the toughest opponents sometimes wore suits. He was a young man, full of dreams, but he was also navigating a world where power wasn't always fair, and where true independence was a rare and costly thing. As Cassius Clay's star rose, he started to see the cracks in the shiny facade of professional boxing. The relationship between the sport and the less savory elements of society, including organized crime, began to show itself more clearly. It wasn't always a direct threat with a gun to his head. Sometimes it was much more subtle, more insidious. These were the moments where a young, ambitious fighter learned that the game had rules beyond the ropes. He'd sign contracts that seemed fair on the surface, only to find clauses that tied him up financially for years, giving away a huge chunk of his earnings to managers and promoters who did little more than collect their cut. There were promises of big fights, lucrative endorsements, or training facilities that never quite materialized. He'd be told one thing, only for something completely different to happen. It was a constant dance where he, the talent, was often the last to know the real score. He was a young man, full of energy and belief in his own abilities. But he was also navigating a world where trust was a luxury he couldn't always afford. There were times he felt like a pawn in a much bigger game. He'd train hard, win fights, and then watch as the rewards seemed to flow more freely to others around him. He saw fellow fighters, equally talented, get tangled in bad deals, their careers cut short not by a knockout punch, but by financial ruin or exhaustion from constant exploitation. These weren't overt acts of violence, but they were certainly abusive. Managers would push fighters into too many bouts, not giving them enough time to recover, just to make another quick buck. They'd control every aspect of a fighter's life, from their diet to their public appearances, all while taking a disproportionate share of the earnings. Cassius, with his sharp mind and growing awareness, didn't miss these patterns. He saw how easily a young, eager fighter could be taken advantage of, especially one from a background like his, where opportunities were scarce and the allure of a better life was strong. He learned to be wary, to question, even when it meant ruffling feathers. He started to understand that the Mafia boss encounter, the one from the dimly lit room, wasn't some random, isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of navigating this corrupt system, a system designed to control and exploit talent for maximum profit. The emotional toll of this constant battle outside the ring was immense. Every negotiation, every contract discussion, every attempt to assert his independence felt like another fight. He carried the weight of knowing that his career, his very future, was always under scrutiny, always subject to the whims of powerful men who saw him as an investment, not a person. He learned to project an image of unwavering confidence. But beneath that bravado was a man constantly assessing risks, constantly trying to protect himself and his future. These subtle humiliations, the broken promises, the negligent behavior of those who were supposed to guide him, they all chipped away at him. But they also hardened him. They taught him invaluable lessons about the world he was in, about who he could trust, and about the sheer force of will it would take to truly be his own man. He was building up a resilience, a quiet determination that would serve him well when the stakes became truly life or death, when the threats became undeniable, and when he finally had to stand alone against the darkest forces in the sport. He was learning that the greatest challenges weren't always physical. Sometimes they were about holding on to your soul in a world that wanted to own it. The pressure on Ali didn't just come from shady promoters or bad deals. It escalated to a whole new level as his fame grew. His outspoken nature, especially about civil rights and the Vietnam War, made him a target. It felt like the world was watching his every move, waiting for him to slip up. These weren't quiet whispers anymore. They were shouts from every corner. He spent countless hours talking with his closest people. His trainers, Angelo Dundee, and his cutman, Ferdy Pacheco, knew the boxing world inside and out. They understood the dangers, the hidden agendas. They'd sit with Ali, sometimes late into the night, discussing the latest threats, the new demands from powerful men who wanted a piece of him. His family, especially his mother and father, were constant sources of support, but they also worried. They saw the toll it was taking on him, the way he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. There were definitely arguments, heated discussions where some urged caution, telling him to just focus on boxing, to stay out of politics. Others, though, like his close friend and confidant, felt he had a responsibility to speak up, to use his platform. The outside world wasn't making it any easier. The 1960s were a turbulent time in America. The civil rights movement was gaining strength, but so was the resistance to it. Racial prejudice was a daily reality. Then there was the Vietnam War, tearing the country apart. Ali, a black man who openly questioned the war and converted to Islam, became a lightning rod for controversy. Neighbors, people he'd known his whole life, looked at him differently. Some openly supported him, proud of his courage. Others, however, cast silent judgments, their disapproval clear in their averted gazes or hushed conversations. The media, of course, amplified everything, turning every statement he made into a national debate. This constant public scrutiny, the feeling of being under a microscope, pushed Ali to his emotional limit more than once. Imagine having every decision, every word, picked apart by millions. He was grappling with immense burdens, the physical demands of being a world champion, the constant threat of exploitation, and now the psychological weight of standing up for his beliefs in a deeply divided country. He was fighting battles inside and outside the ring, and sometimes the ones outside felt even tougher. He'd have moments of doubt, of course. Who wouldn't? But his convictions were too strong. He truly believed in what he was doing, in fighting for justice and equality. The atmosphere of 1960s America, with its protests, its riots, its calls for change, fueled his fire. He wasn't just a boxer. He was a symbol, whether he wanted to be or not. And that meant the stakes were always incredibly high. Every punch he threw, every word he spoke, echoed far beyond the boxing ring. He knew that, and the powerful men who wanted him to lose knew it too. They understood that controlling Ali meant controlling a message, controlling a movement. That's why the pressure was so relentless, so personal. It was a world on edge. And Ali was right in the middle of it all, trying to hold on to his identity and his principles against overwhelming opposition. The pressure kept building to a breaking point. Ali, despite everything, refused to bend. His commitment to his principles wasn't just a talking point. It was how he lived. He kept speaking out against the war, kept advocating for civil rights, even when it hurt his career. He lost his heavyweight title and faced years of legal battles, but he never changed his stance. This unwavering commitment was what truly drew the ire of certain powerful figures. They saw his defiance not just as an inconvenience, but as a direct challenge to their authority and their way of doing things. Then came the fight everyone was talking about. It was a huge event, drawing massive crowds and even bigger money. Ali knew this fight was about more than just boxing. It was a statement. He had trained harder than ever, not just for the physical battle, but for the war of wills he knew was coming. He heard whispers, of course, about how certain people had a lot riding on the outcome, how they preferred a different champion. He wasn't naive. He understood the undercurrents, the hidden hands trying to steer the sport. What truly pushed things over the edge, what brought the Mafia boss directly to him, was a specific act of defiance Ali made public just days before the fight. He had been approached multiple times by various intermediaries, offering him money, endorsements, even promises of an easier path if he would just tone down his rhetoric, if he would just be a boxer and nothing more. Each time, Ali refused. He saw it as a test, a challenge to his integrity. He publicly announced that he would not be swayed, that he would fight for himself and for what he believed in, regardless of the consequences. He even hinted in a newspaper interview that some powerful people were trying to influence the outcome of his upcoming fight. He didn't name names, but the message was clear. He was calling them out. This public statement was the final straw. It wasn't just about winning or losing a fight anymore. It was about control, about showing who was boss. The Mafia boss, whose influence reached deep into the boxing world, couldn't let Ali get away with such open defiance. It threatened his entire operation, his image of being someone who could get whatever he wanted. He saw Ali's actions as a personal insult, a direct challenge to his power. Ali had crossed a line, not by winning or losing, but by daring to speak truth to power, by refusing to be bought or intimidated. The boss, a man used to operating in the shadows, felt compelled to step out and confront Ali face to face. He needed to make an example, to show everyone that he was still in charge, that his word was law. It wasn't just about one fight. It was about maintaining his grip on the entire sport. He saw Ali as a loose cannon, a symbol of rebellion that needed to be put down. The threat wasn't a casual suggestion. It was a desperate attempt to regain control, to reassert dominance over a fighter who refused to play by the established corrupt rules. Ali, looking into the boss's cold eyes, understood everything. He knew this wasn't just about his career. It was about his soul. He could give in, take the easy path, ensure his safety and future. Or he could stand firm, face the unknown, and remain true to himself. In that dimly lit room, with the weight of the world on his shoulders, Ali made his definitive decision. He would not lose. Not tonight, not ever. Not for them. He would fight with everything he had, not just for the title, but for every principle he had ever stood for. He transformed from a fighter under threat to a symbol of unyielding conviction. The boss's threat, meant to break him, instead solidified his resolve. The bell rang, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the roar of the crowd. Ali moved with a grace that defied his size, a whirlwind of speed and precision. Every jab, every feint, every powerful right cross was more than just a punch. It was a defiant answer to the threat he had received. He wasn't just fighting his opponent. He was fighting the invisible forces that tried to control him, the shadows that loomed over the sport. His corner team, usually a flurry of shouted instructions, watched in a stunned silence, understanding the deeper battle unfolding. They saw the fire in his eyes, the absolute resolve that fueled every movement. They knew this was different. His family, watching from ringside, held their breath with every exchange. They had seen the worry in his eyes in the days leading up to the fight, the quiet determination that settled over him. They knew the risks, not just of the fight itself, but of defying such powerful men. Some had urged caution, whispering about safety in the future. Others, like his mother, simply offered prayers and unwavering belief. When Ali landed a particularly brutal combination, sending his opponent reeling, a collective gasp and then a cheer erupted from their section. It was a cheer not just for the points scored, but for the spirit of their son, their brother, who refused to bend. The media, always hungry for a story, picked up on the unusual intensity of Ali's performance. Reporters noted the focused aggression, the almost personal nature of his attacks. They couldn't articulate the underlying pressure, but they sensed a narrative far grander than a simple title defense. The public, a mix of adoring fans and harsh critics, watched captivated. Those who had doubted him, who had scoffed at his outspokenness, found themselves unable to look away. He was a spectacle, an enigma, and tonight he was something more. A man fighting for his very soul in front of the world. Round after round, Ali dominated. His opponent, a formidable fighter in his own right, found himself unable to match Ali's ferocity. By the 10th round, it was clear. Ali was not just winning, he was making a statement. He delivered the final blows with a precision that bordered on art, sending his opponent to the canvas. The referee's count was a mere formality. The crowd erupted, a deafening wave of cheers, whistles, and stomping feet. Ali stood in the center of the ring, arms raised, his face a mix of exhaustion and triumph. It wasn't just a physical victory, it was a moral one. The Mafia boss, watching from a dimly lit private box, felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. His face, usually impassive, showed a flicker of something akin to disbelief, then a slow, simmering rage. Ali had defied him, publicly. The boss's attempt at control had not only failed, but had backfired spectacularly. Ali's victory was a public humiliation, a direct challenge to his authority that reverberated through his entire operation. His influence, once seemingly absolute, was now questioned. The whispers would start. The doubts would creep in. Ali's integrity had chipped away at the boss's power, proving that not everything could be bought or intimidated. The boss left the arena early, his shadow shrinking in the face of Ali's blinding light. Ali's victory that night solidified his legend. He wasn't just a boxer. He was a symbol, a man who, when faced with overwhelming odds and insidious threats, chose conviction over compromise. His refusal to lose, not just in the ring, but in life, echoed far beyond the boxing world. It resonated with the civil rights movement, with those who fought against injustice, with anyone who dared to stand up for what they believed in. He showed that courage wasn't just about throwing a punch. It was about holding your ground, even when powerful forces tried to push you down. Muhammad Ali, the greatest of all time, taught the world that some battles are indeed fought before the first punch is thrown, and that true victory often lies in the unwavering spirit of defiance. His legacy continues to inspire, a testament to the power of one man's integrity against overwhelming odds, reminding us that true strength comes from within,